So a lot of clients call me and ask, Diana, do you know how to handle narcissists? Because I only want to work with a lawyer who knows how to deal with them. And as an experienced psychologist and therapist, what have you seen is a tendency in narcissistic divorce and how to deal with a narcissistic opposing spouse?
So let's define narcissism, right? There are like people who have narcissistic traits, and some are really flaring narcissists, right? And some are milder versions. There are overt and covert narcissists. But if we look at like what is the definition of narcissism, it is like it's called 3 E's, right? So the 3 E's of narcissism. Number one, people are only capable of exploitative relationships when they are like flaring narcissists. What are exploitative relationships? I win, you lose, and I don't care.
Well, that's the story of my life with some of my cases.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
The second E is entitlement. So it's the double standard. I'm entitled to it, but you're not. So people use kind of different rules for themselves and other people, right? And the most important one to notice is lack of empathy. So the last E is empathy deficit. And it is the reason for exploitation because empathy is a really important trait to develop. Children don't have yet the capacity for empathy, so a lot of times people who have narcissistic traits had childhood trauma, so they didn't develop the ability to put another person's shoes on and know how it feels. Right? So then a lot of times when you deal with narcissistic clients, it is really important to help them recognize where their needs can be met. And, compromise is very difficult with people who feel entitled. So they're never happy. A lot of times narcissistic clients, I'm sure if you become an attorney for the narcissistic client, they will want to manipulate you and fire you and file complaints against you when you are not really having their needs met because you feel like it is not ethical or right.
I notice they are at the beginning the most charming people. They swipe me as a professional or the other side, women after feed. They're so good at convincing they're the best match for whatever relationship it is, professional or not.
That's the hallmark sign of narcissism. Like in romantic relationships, we call it love bombing. They will swipe you off your feet, right? They will be very impressive. And a lot of times they are very accomplished people.
How to spot them and how to deal with them in a divorce in a way that it's not... I have a case, fortunately it's not my case. I have a friend whose sister is going through this, where she married a husband who fights for 50% of the custody, 80% of the custody. Now he wants 90% of the custody. But whenever he gets his 50%, he drops it off at his mom. He drops their child at his mom's house. He doesn't spend time. And I'm thinking, he doesn't care about the child. How? And he is asking her to pay support, although he makes all the money and the court ordered her to pay support because on the books he looks like he doesn't make any money, but he hired a big law firm. So there's a trial coming up and I'm thinking, she cannot afford a lawyer anymore. Nobody wants her case because it's coming up really soon. He is going after everything. There's no walk away. Like if she walks away, she will have to give up her child, which she's never going to do. She's willing to walk away from money. How to deal with these type of people who are going to war just to win, no matter the cost, no matter the means?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that, but this is something that is incredibly difficult. So in any relationship of two people, there is you, there is, let's say, me, another person, and there is us. So people who have narcissistic personality, they don't have the us piece because it's all about them, right? And then, unfortunately, when they don't win, they become very distressed. They don't know how to self-regulate. So competing to win becomes their desire. So this is what is heartbreaking for me a lot of times. Not only men can be actually narcissistically preoccupied. In this case, it is a husband, but I also testified in court in the case where the wife was extremely narcissistic and, could not be an effective mom, but definitely was fighting her husband on that. So these are heartbreaking cases because a lot of times kids become victims of this very acrimonious divorce. And a lot of times, as a therapist, I see adults, when they had the trauma of parents, narcissistic parents, fighting and not negotiating agreements. So actually, what I heard, there is an app that helps people, I can look it up, the name of this app, but it helps people like not use the language in communication that will create. So it's just using the app if the person doesn't have the capacity for empathy. Like, I personally think that our capacity for empathy and compassion is the litmus test of how healthy your mind is, right? So, and in narcissistic kind of preoccupation, because there is no us, it's very hard to negotiate the story of shared success. Parents who made a decision to dissolve marriage still have children who they hopefully love. So to me, the story of shared success in these marriages that are being dissolved when there are children, thinking about how to make, this very difficult experience for children not to be traumatic, so that they will need to go through therapy when they're adults. So that's the story of shared success. But with narcissistic preoccupation, people cannot really care about other people if they are like extreme narcissists because of their own trauma. So a lot of times people say that narcissistic personality disorder is having this big ego, but it is not really the case. So usually people are extremely insecure. They have very fragile ego. And then it is shame that they have. A lot of times they have like trauma growing up. And then narcissism is just the adaptation against this shame. So one of the people I mentioned, Terry Real, who wrote the book Us, he works specifically with men. And he talks about the narcissistic adaptation being like the result of childhood trauma. So, but what happens a lot of times, in order to like seek help and get treatment, you need to recognize that you're doing something wrong, right? But narcissistic people only blame other people. They're not taking responsibility.
So one way to deal with narcissistic person, I think I was married to one in my first marriage.
When
I wanted to go to America, in order to convince him to let me do something that benefits me, it needed to benefit him in some shape or form. I said, if I don't go to America for 1 year to do masters, I'm going to regret it and blame you in 20 years for missing that chance in my life, and never will forget and forgive. And he agreed.
That was a good move, was the guilt button.
The guilt, right.
The guilt and shame are different because, shame is this universal feeling. We all grow up like learning how to experience shame. Shame appears in the first 18 months of life. And it is this feeling that we have that is a result of us doing something that is not okay for the environment that we grow up. Shame is, I'm wrong, I'm a mistake. So it's a very undifferentiated feeling, and all of us have shame. Guilt is a different feeling, and the person can only experience guilt when the brain is evolved enough. So it's between 3 and 5 years of age when there is a lot of brain wiring that happens where we can feel guilt. And the message in guilt, my behavior is wrong. The message in shame, I am a mistake, I am wrong. So when we feel shame, we just kind of collapse. And this is a very toxic feeling. Narcissists have a lot of shame that they don't recognize. And I always, when I work with people who have a lot of shame, I say to them, you cannot really manage your shame away, but you can turn it into guilt. So guilt, however, is a pro-social feeling, because if you are remorseful, if you regret having done, remember how we were talking about flipping your lid? And a lot of times we can learn from these experiences when we do and say things that we regret later. I teach my clients to exercise I call it the art and science of a heartfelt apology. Yeah, I screwed up, I'm sorry. And when you feel it in your heart, you are less likely to do it again. But if you have shame, then you kind of shut down. And that's what the core of narcissism is.